Alright, we are back with a brand new review, and today we're going to be talking about Mid90s. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mid90s is Jonah Hill's debut with both writing and directing. Mid90s is a coming-of-age story taking place in the 90s in Los Angeles with a kid named Stevie, who's basically just trying to kind of like escape his really crazy home life and ends up finding what he considers to be a new family in the skate culture. Now, as is similar with most coming-of-age stories, there doesn't really have like a solid ending to this. Jonah Hill specifically described it as like a moment in time. It's just a slice of life. But it does such a great job just expressing the growing pains that I can forgive it for kind of having an abrupt ending. But I just want to put that out there for people who really like closed off storylines, just proper endings. Like I said, this is a coming of age story. The character development, the interactions, and just the stuff he's going through is the point of the movie. There isn't a set conflict that's gonna have a resolution. It's just showing the growing pains of life. Jonah Hill really pulled this together in a beautiful way. He surrounded himself with a great group of people to help him make this film. Music by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who have done my favorite soundtrack, which was for Social Network. And while there are areas that could definitely be improved upon, I think this was a fantastic first outing for him. Now, the reason why I really like this movie so much is because I honestly feel like I relate to Stevie in a certain way. I'm not quite as young as he was. The actor who's portraying the character of Stevie, I believe, was 11 when the movie was filming, but he's supposed to be 13 in the movie, but he looks really young, and there's just this like unbridled happiness to him when he starts getting accepted in the group that is just like, I think everybody can kind of relate to that in a certain way. When you get accepted by people that you look up to, and things just kind of fall into place. Like, it's just that childlike wonder that it rarely happens the older you get. It can be positive or negative. Sometimes it's really bad to have that like such positive reinforcement for how, you know, people are treating you and making you feel included. But the reason why I kind of really relate to that is because when I was 13 and 14, I started getting very much into like punk music and the punk culture. And then once I hit high school, I had friends who had older brothers that were also in that culture. And everybody was like, okay, so all of these like, you know, 16, 17, 18, even 19-year-olds that haven't quite graduated yet, or that have graduated and have all these punk house parties, they all drink. They all have a great time drinking. So if I want to go to these parties and be included with them, that's how you be cool. And I wouldn't say that I was falling for like peer pressure. It was like an unknowing peer pressure. You just feel like you have to do things to fit in, even if nobody is physically handing you anything. And unfortunately, I did kind of get caught up with that. You know, I was 14. Me and my friends would just, you know, try to get like alcohol in different places. There was like this train bridge that all the punks drank under. We would go to these house parties. And luckily, before I got too swept into it, I did actually have like one really bad experience that maybe I'll talk about sometime on YouTube when I was like 14, and it was terrible. I ended up in the hospital. I wasn't like dying or anything, but it's just like the surrounding circumstances landed me in the hospital. It was terrible. I felt so bad for putting my parents through that, and it really just kind of like shook me out of it. I was like, this isn't cool. This isn't okay. This doesn't make me a better person. This doesn't make me a happier person. And I kind of backed off on that group of people and found a significantly better group of friends, like my friend Jeff, who also streams. You should definitely check out. And I just want to put that out there for younger people who might be watching this. Like, you know, underage drinking, it's not cool. It doesn't make you cool. And I'm not trying to turn this into a PSA. I'm just saying that desire to fit in that way is not. It's not worth it. But basically the point is that I could really relate to Stevie in that way, because he's getting entrenched into this world where he's hanging out with older people who just do this naturally. You know, some of them do it a lot, some of them do it casually. And it was just so relatable to have like one character kind of making something available to him, and then having another character just being like, you know, like, why are you giving that to kids? But then he still does it anyways because he just wants to fit in. Now, even though there are a lot of those darker moments where you're watching an underage kid just drinking and just doing things you're like, no, please, little baby child, don't do that. There are, like I mentioned, these moments of just pure joy, like when one of the guys gives him a new skateboard because he had like thrashed his, and when they like give him a nickname, and when they invite him to do things, or they tell him to go get water for them, and he just feels included in the group. This just like the smile on his face is just pure. It's spectacular. And to know that the actors in this are not actors, they're all pro skaters, is astounding. They all do a great job, but there were a couple of like really standout actors, specifically Sonny Suljic, who did play Stevie, and na-kel Smith, who played Ray. He was extra fantastic. He's kind of like the moral compass of the movie. He's the one who's trying really hard. He's the one trying to make it as a pro skater. So he's not as involved in the drinking and the drugs and the partying. He's just very dedicated to trying to become a pro skater. But his performance the entire movie is just next level. And there's this one moment where he and Stevie are having a serious conversation, and it does this really cool thing that most coming of age stories don't do. And it just kind of shows that every different person kind of has their own struggles. And you don't need it laid out the way he lays it out to Stevie, because you kind of see it. You see little hints of what people are going through. You see how one person, also has a bad home life, like Stevie does. You see how someone else doesn't have any money and has these dreams and aspirations to becoming a filmmaker. And this dude is totally an homage to Spike Jonze with like the blind skateboard merch all the time. Like that's definitely what was going on there. How this other guy literally has every opportunity to succeed. His parents are rich, they went to Harvard, and he's still just kind of like pissing it all away because he doesn't want to try. And I just really like that there's that subtle idea that all these kids are just trying to find their place in the world. They're not bad people, they're not trying to ruin anybody's life, they're just kids and they don't know what they're doing. Lucas Hedges also did a fantastic job as Stevie's brother, and I know that he is in like every movie right now, but he honestly did such an incredible job. When the movie starts, he's shown as this very like abusive brother that Stevie's looking up to and constantly trying to get like positive reinforcement from, and he's like hanging out in his room like it's like this temple shrine, and he's just trying to do anything to get his respect. And then when it just never happens, I feel like that's a large reason why Stevie ends up connecting so heavily with the skater group. It replaces the role that his brother had in his life with these new people. So overall, I think it did a great job kind of expressing that idea of like cliques and fitting in, and just the growing pains and coming of age. How even in these cliques, when people stay so tight together, there's still tensions between members, but nobody ever brings them up because you're not trying to mess anything up, you're trying to keep the group together. And while it wasn't perfect, and I think it would have benefited from maybe like an extra 15-20 minutes of runtime just to kind of like go a little bit deeper in certain areas, I do think it all did come together really nicely. And it's just, I feel like sometimes it's better to be left wanting more than to have gotten too much. Now let's get into a couple spoilers, just to talk about some specific things I really liked. So if you don't want any spoilers, now is when you should click off. All right, the juice stuff with Ian, so Lucas Hedges' character, I liked how that was just this kind of, it was like a symbol between the two. So the entire movie you see Ian just, asking for orange juice, drinking orange juice, and there's that moment where when Stevie comes back drunk and he's just calling him out. He's just like, you're a loser, you don't have any friends, and he's like literally just telling this guy all the things that he knows about himself, but just assumed his brother would never know about him. I feel like when you're the older sibling and you have that level of power, your kid siblings just think you're God. And the moment when they stop feeling that way must be incredibly painful. So when he comes home and he starts calling him out on all that stuff, and obviously, Ian starts like chasing him around, and then Stevie goes in the fridge and grabs the juice and just like runs with it. It's Stevie's moment of trying to take power over the situation, and then obviously you see the breakdown that Ian ends up having, and it's heartbreaking. And that's what I mean when I say that he did such a good job expressing that like every character in the movie is dealing with some kind of struggle. Everybody is experiencing their own challenges. And then you get that moment after the crash, and the crash itself was done fantastically. It's like, something's gonna happen. I know a lot of people were saying like Ray is too smart to get in the car. I honestly think Ray got in the car because the earlier things that had happened during the day was that he had told his friend, like his childhood friend, to just, like step off for a minute, like get out of the situation, like you're embarrassing me. He could tell that there was hostility there. So I really feel like even though he knew it was a bad idea to get in the car, he was just trying to reconcile with a friend. You gotta remember that these are like 17-year-old kids. They are not that smart. They'll make mistakes. It's not a cut and dry situation. So that's why I totally understand why they would have gotten in the car. And then it's just that moment where like fourth grade is just like, hey, can you pull? And then it just does the flash to white and his face is shocked. That's honestly one of the best like jump scares in a movie that isn't a horror movie, and it didn't feel cheap and it felt so perfect. But then obviously once Stevie's in the hospital and Ian's waiting there and he wakes up and he just pulls out the 2 little juices and he gives one to Stevie. It's just that moment of him becoming less selfish and realizing that there are other people in the world, and he doesn't have to just shut himself in and be so abusive just because he was probably treated pretty badly when he was growing up. I think Rey is one of the best solid moral compasses we've seen in a movie in ages. Like I said, there was these really subtle moments where, I'm just gonna call him FS, when FS was handing out like the Adderall or the Ritalin to the guys, and he's like, you know, why are you giving it to these kids? And then he doesn't take it himself, which I thought was like a nice touch. Like, just because you think you have to do things to feel involved in a group doesn't mean you actually do, but when you're younger, you don't always see it that way. Now, the one thing that was like really, really odd and was probably kind of just like almost like a weird homage to Kids, and honestly, the guy who created Kids, Harmony Korine, is in the movie briefly, so you can tell that those callbacks are intentional. There's that like weird awkward sex scene, and I know that like she's supposed to be like a 16, 17-year-old, he's supposed to be 13. Still super weird, still super gross, and very uncomfortable moment, especially when like the kid was 11 when it was being filmed, and he looks young, even though he's supposed to be 13 in the movie. It was still kind of odd. So that was a little bit uncomfortable, and I almost felt like it should have been dealt with in a different way. So like, it wasn't actually a sex scene, but it was just like a sexual scene, and that kind of came across as a little unusual. Oh, and then one of the other things I enjoyed was that kind of tension between Ruben and Stevie, where Ruben thinks that he's gonna kind of be able to move up. He's no longer going to be the youngest person on the totem pole. He's not going to be the kicking block, but then they all really take to Stevie and see him as like this little brother figure. So it's like it's less of them being on an equal platform and them trying to raise Stevie up higher, because, you know, he's just this cool little kid who can take hits, and Ruben still just ends up being that like, you go do this, you go do that kind of person. Yeah, overall, I thought it was I'm really happy to have seen the movie. I'd love to see it again. I think it could have used even like 10, 15 minutes extra runtime just to have a little bit more, but like I said, for it to be like a moment in time coming of age story, I think it was incredibly well done. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and we'll catch you all later.